Hey everyone, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. I'm back from the Florida Keys. I was best man in a wedding, so there was no saying no. And I know it was a little risky, but we're back. We're sort of hunkering down at home and trying to keep away from other folks. Just to be safe, we're all feeling pretty good here. I'm a little hoarse, you can hear it, but that was from staying up to like 3 in the morning talking and probably having a little too much to drink. So I hope everyone out there is safe and doing well and keeping out of harm's way. This is a weird times, man. This is probably the strangest thing that's going to happen to just about everybody on the planet. So with that said, let's do some lure stuff. So I had a bunch of questions about the dynamics of basically the flight of a lure in the water, lipped crankbait, what is actually making it do what it does. And I'm really looking forward to doing this video, but this is not the video, so sorry for the teaser. But what I am going to do is I'm going to do a couple of in-depth questions and answers. The first thing I'm going to do is I had a question, actually I had like 3 questions on how I make the wire harnesses for these rubber or soft plastic lures. These are twitch baits. I make these wire harnesses in the shape of a truss to create a rigid structure, kind of a skeleton inside the soft plastic lure. And I've made a couple of videos on how I came up with the design, but I don't believe I went into any great detail on how I actually make it. So let's do that right now. Most people are going to be making lures that are probably a little larger than this. This is a very small little twitch bait. And if you do, you can use this exact same system. You'll just have to upsize your wire diameter. I'm using this AFW tooth-proof stainless steel. This is leader wire. It's 174 pound tensile strength, and the diameter is 0.72 millimeter, which is 0.029 inches. I'm going to be using my Twist Tech wire twister. It's a real simple little eye twisting machine. And you can pick one of these things up on Amazon for right around $80 or $90. So step 1 is to know how much wire you're going to actually need. Let me show you how I calculate it. Okay, we'll use this drawing to help us figure it out. The tie-on eye is there. Let's put the belly hook eye right there, and then the tail hook eye. Internal harness will look something like this. Now if you've got a lure like this that has a lot of arch to it, you can arch the top, and that gives you just a little more rigidity, but on this one we're just going to go straight across. So what I do is I just measure this distance. I measure the distance from the long eye, we'll call that A, this B, and then I do a straight line distance across here. And then for each of the eyes, I like to add 3/4 of an inch. But if you're using heavier wire, you'll want to add something along the order of an inch for each of your eyes. So on that little bait, it turns out to be 8 and 3/4 inches for the wire. So before we get too deep into the wire bending, let me just show you a couple of alternatives that I've been using on terminating this thing. At the very end, you'll have a terminal end of your wire, and it has to connect to the very back of your truss. And originally, I would do just a string whipping, and I would just use line for tying flies, and I soak it with some crazy glue, and that works pretty well. It holds it pretty tight. It's pretty solid. And I've also done models like this that's a little heavier wire, and I solder it. It works really well. I just think that soldering is just a bit too much work and takes a little too long. So the technique that I'm using now is to use one of these little crimp sleeves that are used to make eyes on leaders, and it makes it a lot easier, and it's pretty doggone solid. Let me show you how it works. First, I'm going to cut my wire to length. You can cut it a little longer, but don't cut it short. Let's go over to the twisting machine. So if you have one of these, you know how to use it. I'm just going to kind of walk through what I'm doing. The first step is to just create the loop for the eye twist, and I like to have this tag end extending out about a 1/2 inch, and then you make a slight shoulder on it, bring it over to the twisting arm, and you give it a little pressure, and that 1/2 inch should give you about 2.5 wraps, and that's plenty. So now to place the next eye, we got to go back to the mold and check the size. I always start off at the tail. It makes it a little simpler, and then I'm going to go ahead. So I put the wire right over where the nose eye would be, and then I'm going to give it a little kink just so I know where to put it. And this is the point where you have to put your sleeve in so that you'll have it for attaching the very terminal end of this twist system. And now I have the kink, so I know exactly where to put that. That kink should be right on that pin that makes the eye. So I'll bring it around, give it a little bit of a shoulder, then we'll stick it on the twisting arm. What you want to do is just give it about 1.5 wraps and finish with the tag end aligned with the eye, so it's coming off and you've got a vertical eye, and this is coming off perpendicular. So I'll give that a little tweak, and that should do it. And you can see how that's formed, and you really don't need to give it much more than a full 1.5 turns. Now those two first eyes are perfectly distanced apart. I just need to get this leg to align with the angle that it needs to be in to be aligned with this belly eye. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a forced bend here. I'm doing this really slowly. When you get going and you know how to do this pretty quickly, actually you can get some real production out of it. If you take a look, you can see that right there is where my belly eye would be. And now I can take my bender again. I like to make that first bend outward because this eye needs to kind of poke downwards to be in that location so it sticks out of the lure. So I'm going to kink it, and let's go back to the twister. Right, so now I'm going to take and align that kink I just made with that bend pin right there. And the only thing you have to do different here is you have to manipulate this end that you've already made to keep it out of the way. So you have to kind of like get it to loop around. I'll make a very light shoulder on this. And the same goes for this process. You've got to be able to sort of make sure you don't bend both pieces. So I'm going to be taking this and moving it out of the way. And then I'm only going to make, again, only 1.5 turns and make sure it's aligned so it forms a nice flat kind of truss, a little triangle. And that's pretty close. I can always bend it a little more with my hands. So let's go back to the mold and finish this off. So the first thing you want to do is make sure all 3 of the eyes are at the point where the eyes should be. And there you go. You can see it sticks right where that eye is going to be. And now this leg, I'm going to bring it around. And hopefully you're able to see that the 3 eyes are in their little sockets. And now I just need to find where to bend this tail. I like to have something around 3/8 of an inch, 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch of a bend, a flat bend, so I can attach this thing to it. So I'll just grab this wire about to the point where I get that 3/8 of an inch after I bend it. So I'm going to give it a little kink. It doesn't have to be totally bent, so you don't have to bend it too much. A slight angle actually does the job. So now I have it pretty much how I want it. I just need to cut the tag end off this thing, and I know exactly where to do it because it'll have to be just short of the wire twists on that last eye. And there you go. All I have to do now is fasten it in place, and that's easy enough to do. I just slide the little sleeve down and insert this into the sleeve, and you can see how it forms that nice triangle. So then all I have to do now is give this sleeve a good crimping. And there you go. That is not going to come apart. There you go, and then it's just a matter of getting this thing positioned in place, and putting the cover on and pouring it so that you can get a nice soft plastic lure that has some rigidity and won't tear itself apart. One more point, if you're using heavier wire on a bigger lure, when you fasten that last piece on this truss, instead of going up and then bending that way and putting your sleeve in, for a little more strength you can take it up and bend it this way and put your sleeve in here, and that gives it just a little more stiffness and a lot more strength as far as that sleeve ever failing. Alright, I hope that satisfies everybody's curiosity on making those things. I had a few questions on that, and I'm sorry I didn't ever show that before really clearly, so let's move on to the next questions. So I've had several questions about the silver plate and how much it actually costs to put on per lure. And now it's always going to be a little different because my lures tend to be somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 inches long, slightly larger on some of the top waters. And I have my own spray gun that I made, and you can see that. I guess I should link the video on how I made this. This makes it much more efficient than any of the guns that you can buy. Just using one source for pricing, and that would be Angel Gilding. They have a full kit, which is like their beginner kit that runs $368, and it does come with the plating chemicals, but a very small amount of it. I did the calculations really quick, and I assumed a little less productivity because they're using their guns. So I figured you could make about 167 lures with it, and that comes out to $2.34 per lure. So it gets a little expensive if you buy the kit. Now if you make your own gun, then that's really all you need to make. Then your costs go way down because you can buy the chemicals that you need for about $140, including shipping. And that'll give you enough chemical to plate somewhere between 650 and 670 lures, depending on their size. A little less if you're making really big lures. And that brings the price way down to like 21 cents a lure, which is a lot cheaper than I was making them before because I was actually buying smaller quantities. They used to sell a smaller bottle, which is not cost efficient. So after you have all the gear to actually apply the stuff, it's probably a lot less than $1. And even if you're pretty inefficient, you could probably keep it to around 50 cents per lure to plate them. So I've also gotten a bunch of questions on using polyacrylic. This is by Minwax. It's a protective finish that's water based. It's kind of like a polyurethane, but it's not. I use it as a mid coat, not as a top coat, and I use it sort of to seal the paint and not to seal the casting material or wood. Now you can use it to seal wood, but I just rarely work in wood. After I've airbrushed my lure, I use this to seal that paint before I do a clear coat. I find that it gives me much more consistent clear coating, much fewer occurrences of ripples or any kind of like orange peels or fish eyes or anything like that. So this has been a real blessing. I use it all the time, and it doesn't seem to sort of lower the durability of the paint job. And along the lines of clear coats, I get a lot of questions about clear coating the silver plate and how durable it is and how it never really works. But it actually does. If you watch the videos on silver plating, you'll see that I really get a really nice finish. Here's one that I clear coated, oh, I don't know, probably 2 months ago, 3 months ago. And you can still see that the gold is really nice, brightly gold, and the silver underneath is nice and bright. You can see how well it reflects my fingers there. I hope you can see that. But it's absolutely imperative that you clear coat your silver plate really quickly, within just 24 hours, I would suggest, and with something that won't cause it to react. And here's one that I didn't clear coat early enough, And you can see it's gone sort of kind of a tarnish color. And once that happens, the finish is ruined. You can't recover from that. I have finished the frogs that folks had won in that little drawing I did a few weeks ago. And just because of the circumstances right now, I'm not going out and boxing them up and sending them out. But it'll be a few weeks. But I'll get them to you hopefully in time for you to be able to go outside yourself and fish. With that, thanks everybody for watching. Hope you stay home and stay safe. And if you have friends that are just sitting around waiting for this to pass, turn them onto the channel. Maybe they'll get something out of it, and get them to subscribe. Thanks a lot, and I'll catch you on the next video.